If you like the theme, we tried to be respectful of the intellectual property. That font um, I found online. It's like called Crilly, so it's not the exact font. Um, we will make the slides available when we're done. Let's go ahead and get started. So, if you've never watched Star Trek, especially Next Generation, you might be curious what number 1 and number 2 mean. Those were just the designations for the first and second officer on the Enterprise. Brian and I are peers. There's no hierarchy or ranking there. I guess I was on the team before you, Brian, so maybe that's why I put myself as number 1.
Yeah, but I was at the company before you, so
That's true, but I'm taller than you.
that is true.
Yeah, so I look down on you. Just physically, I look down on you. Everything else, your peers. So we are co-product managers on the database tools team. The most famous, notorious, whatever adjective you want to throw onto the database tools team, it always comes back to SQL Developer. And in today's session, I'm going to give a quick recap of how we got to where we are today and where we're going the rest of this year and the years forward. There's going to be a lot of live demo, not a whole lot of slide work. So Brian did slave on this slide deck, but most of what you're going to see is fun live stuff. So there's a lot of us on right now. If you have a question, I don't think we can take those live, but if you want to type them into the Q&A, we will peer into those as we can. Our contact info is below. So on the Twitters, we're easy to find. I've blogged about all of this stuff on thatjeffsmith.com. Brian has a blog, but I wanted to share his GitHub repo because that's where he's putting a lot of cool stuff to help developers with continuous integration and delivery. He's building a lot of cool hands-on labs, and anything he's working on, you can find there. He's also known as M Biscuits in our Discord channel. Hey, Brian, maybe you can put in an invite to the Discord channel in the chat, or I can do that when you're on.
We can do that.
Yeah, so let's get into it. And our emails are here. And I do invite you guys to, and gals, to email us. If we don't reply right away, you probably need to email us again, or at least that's the way I work. My inbox is just a never-ending stream, and I rarely get to cycle back. Probably the easiest way to talk to us directly is on Twitter. Of course, that's public. So if you don't want to do that, send us a note. So I say it's our 16-year mission. It's more than that. We've been on mission for 16 years. So SQL Developer, its life started, it came out of the, what was the name of where they build the ships off of Mars, Brian? I forget what that was called. But in 2005 is when our first sort of enterprise app launched. And it existed because Larry asked us, and when I say us, I mean Chris, our boss, to build a graphical user interface for the database. Because while SQL Plus is really nice, when you get someone brand new to the Oracle database and they just need to query a table and get it out to an Excel spreadsheet, it can be somewhat frustrating. Point and click. There's always going to be a crowd that needs point and click. Now, there's nothing wrong with the command line interface, and we're going to talk about how we've improved that as well. But in 2005, SQL Developer popped out. Now, it didn't have all of these things in the beginning. In the beginning, it had quite a bit, actually. You had a SQL Scratchpad, or this SQL worksheet that actually had its own SQL Plus script engine built into it. So you could run things like spool and set this and set that. But the main thing was you could run a query in the SQL worksheet and it would come back in this sort of grid or table pattern. So it was just easier to read as a person. And then, of course, God forbid, you could right click on that grid and export it to Excel. Probably still today, the number one thing people ask me is, how do I get things in and out of Excel? But we're not just a GUI for the database. There's also this interactive development environment for the language of the database, which is today PL/SQL. But for tomorrow, it's not just PL/SQL. It's also going to be things like JavaScript and Python, and wherever else the Graal multilingual engine supports. And SQL Developer in the future will be the IDE for those languages as well. On the point and click side, I don't want to type select star from all procedures and then parse those results to see what packages I have. I want to click on a screen and say, show me my packages, and then click on that to see the details. That's our schema browser, and that also includes create and edit dialogue. So instead of typing the create or replace, I can just put in the parameters and put in the names of things, and we generate that code for you. That was all there in day one. Several years after that, I think version 3, we added, what was that, like 2010 or 11, we added the database administration features. So SQL Developer at that point wasn't just SQL Developer. It was all things to all people, but we just kept the name because it was a strong brand. But then you have interfaces to Data Pump, Recovery Manager, Table Space Management, Security, all of that good stuff. And really on the database side, that's where a lot of the active development has been over the past 5 years. Data modeling, I'll talk about that in a second, but there's a complete data modeling solution built into SQL Developer. So if you need those ERDs, if you need to reverse engineer a schema and get your fancy diagrams and your data dictionary reports, that's all there. Of course, this is all free. REST came to the story past that, and I'm going to talk about how Words developed and how Words is being built and used to support this next gen. And as we built this successful platform, other teams at Oracle wanted to take advantage of that. Why build their own interface when we already have it? So the times 10 folks, the data miner folks, the OLAP teams, they built extensions that just plug directly into SQL Developer. People were able to rock and roll. So, we didn't have 5 to 7 million users out of the gate. I think we hit that number like 4 years ago or so. But SQL Developer has for many years been the #1 download on all of Oracle.com after Java. So if you do look at the top 10 lists of downloads, like the first 7 or 8 are all different variations of JREs and JDKs, and then SQL Developer starts popping up. Raptor really did start with, I think, an email from Larry to Chris saying, hey, we need this thing. And the working prototype was up in 3 weeks. The public beta, so to speak, or preview was done there in December. So we just barely scraped by 2005. It's probably really 2006 when version 1.0 was official. But I remember December 2005, there was a big hullabaloo about this Raptor thing that came out about 16, 17 years ago. I personally like the name Raptor. I think it's a stronger name, but Larry likes descriptive names. And if you look at some of the Oracle products, you can see that everywhere. So they went with Oracle SQL Developer. It's a Java application based on the Swing framework. This means you can run it anywhere Oracle Java will run. So Windows, 93, 94% of all of our users are still on Windows. Next 3 or 4% are on Macs. If you've got questions, hey, does this run on Big Sur? Yes, it does. And I've got instructions if you get stuck on getting this running on your Mac, but it shouldn't be hard. And on any Linux distribution that supports Oracle Java, it should run there as well. We plugged into this FCP from JDeveloper that gives us things like working with files and this concept of projects and this concept of here's a system to build wizards out of, and they built things into the editor to support things like search and replace, and they built source control integration into that framework, so for access to Subversion back in the day, or CVS even, or now Git, that comes from that platform. So 90% of what you see in SQL Developer is built by the SQL Developer team. Some of the core low-level stuff, like how documents are managed on the desktop, that comes from that JDev platform. And then when you're using JDeveloper, if you're a Java developer using JDeveloper, any of the database stuff you see in that, like working with tables, that comes back from us. So it's kind of this weird continuous loop of what comes from what. All of this is included with your database license, or it's completely free. And when I say billion saved, that's not a hyperbole. We've literally saved our customers billions of dollars in third-party licensing, both for this and Data Modeler. So the data modeling bit, we acquired that a few years later. That was an acquisition, and it was originally sold. And I'll talk more about that in a second. But when I say complete data modeling solution, this is what I mean. So I think most people, when they think data modeling, they think ERD, which are those entity relationship diagrams. But really what they're really thinking are a relational diagram where they're looking at tables and foreign keys. And yes, we can generate DDL for you. And yes, we can put those in versioning systems. But you get all of this bang. It's available as a separate tool, which I recommend you do if you're going to do serious design work. But if you just want to do a quick and dirty look inside of an existing model or reverse engineer an existing database very quickly, you can do this completely inside of SQL Developer itself. I think after a few months, Chris and Larry both said, hey, this should just all be free. And so there are none of the products that we make right now that have a cost associated with it, except for in terms of support. And that's probably going to be how it is going forward. I mean, you guys and gals pay enough for your databases, whether that's by subscription model in the cloud or term licensing or perm licensing. We did add a command line interface support for the modeler itself in SQLcl. So people were saying, hey, I need to be able to script generating diagram reports and DDL scripts from my models. So there is a model command inside of SQLcl as long as you're on like version 20.3, I think. So here's where some of the next gen stuff kind of comes into play. So modpl SQL is how many years old, Brian? 25?
If it's is it that long? I thought it's probably getting up there.
It's old. It's been deprecated, and when you get to 19C, it's no longer available. So the database needs some sort of gateway to make things available to the internet or to networks via this HTTP or HTTPS protocol. And where Oracle REST Data Services started was this thing called the Apex Listener. So its first mission in life was to make Oracle Application Express or Apex apps available. So you'd make a HTTP call on your browser, mobile, whatever, and back out would pop up HTML pages. But in between your web server and the database was this mid-tier Java app. It's since grown to be way, way, way more than that, and to the point of we completely rebranded the product. It doesn't have the word Apex in the name because it doesn't require Apex. Although today Apex does require ORDs. We love acronyms here. So we always say ORDs, but really when we say ORDs, that's just Oracle REST Data Services. But where we've been spending the majority of our time over the past 5 years is making REST APIs in the Oracle database for the database itself or for the data and programs in the database available to developers so they can build rich modern apps off of that, or even just have CI/CD pipelines implemented via REST calls. And one of the cool things that you can see on the Discord channel are some of these stories where Chris talked about how these things kind of came to life. He professionally was like, hey, I just don't want to be a SQL developer for the rest of my life. What else can I do? And he looked at ModPL SQL and he was like, hey, could there be a modernized, better version of that done in Java? So it took him more than 3 days this time. I think he said it took him 2 weeks to get it working, proof of concept. And then version 2.1 of the Apex listener, it got rebranded as Oracle REST Data Services. And today it's responsible for delivering all of our top applications internally and externally. So our bug database internally for when people are logging bugs and searching open bugs, those are HTML pages that ORDS prints. If you go into the Oracle cloud, especially in the autonomous land, all of the interfaces for autonomous, all of your access to your PDBs is done via ORDS. Okay, so SQLcl. We have for years wanted a better SQL Plus, and we decided to go and build one. So, if I'm writing queries, the output, shouldn't require 15 lines of column formatting things. The program should be smart enough to smart print the output. And better than that, we have access to all these formatters, give the people what they want, give them the output in the formats that they want. So those are done with SQL, simple single commands. You've been running queries for the past 2 years. You should have access to all of those. So built-in command history, autocomplete. People love that stuff in the desktop tool. There shouldn't be any sacrifice just because you've moved down to Bash or the command prompt. So use the tab key to complete things like file names and column names and object names or stored procedure API parameters. Here in the last 3 years, we've been concentrating on fixing or making better the versioning of your application schemas. So we've brought in the open source Liquid-based project and extended it for better Oracle support. And we have an entire talk just on that if you want to hear about it. But the main reason SQLcl was built was because we needed a better way for developers to have command flow and scripting in their interactions with the database. So if then that, and interaction with the OS itself. So you can run things in SQLcl with a mix of JavaScript and SQL. So for example, I can say, run this query that's going to bring these blobs out of a table and actually store them as separate files on my local directory. And that's all done in like less than 20 lines of JavaScript. You don't have to use the JavaScript stuff, but if you want to, it really, really opens up what the tool can do. What I'm going to demo after handing off to Brian, if there's any time at the end, is give a demo of what's coming up for SQLcl in about a month. So highlights there would be integrated VI and Emacs support. I don't want to start any VI Emacs wars. I think everyone knows Emacs is better, but more people use VI. I'll say Emacs does a lot more, but I think VI won that war. But it doesn't matter. You can have your cake or eat it. You can choose which editor you want to use. So you can say DL to delete a word, or DD to delete a word, or delete a line, or use insert and append modes. You have access to all those commands in your buffer while you're editing your SQL and your query scripts. And the insight and code completion is much nicer and smoother and faster now. We've really been working on this upgrade for SQLcl for the past almost 18 months. So it's a pretty big update. And then a little bit later this year, we're going to launch SQLcl with this GraalVM native image, which is a fancy way of saying you're going to get a compiled exe for SQLcl, which means its startup time is going to be even faster than SQL Plus probably. So right now, the number one knock against SQLcl is, oh, I got to wait 3 seconds instead of half a second for it to open. which is, a thing if you're automating things. So there will be a distribution later this year with that GraalVM native image, which means it's going to be super duper fast. And I think at this point, I get to quit talking, and number 2 gets to take over.
Yeah, and we actually had a question on the QA about SQLcl and the autonomous database. And SQLcl is basically, you can use it on any database we have to an extent. I don't know if we've tested it on like 8i or something, but it'll work on the autonomous database. It'll work on XSCS. It'll work on pretty much any database we have. That's modern, I should say.
Yeah. I mean, if you go into Cloud Shell in OCI, SQLcl is there in the console by default.
If
you're on-prem, there's a command, there's a Cloud Connect command that takes in your wallet, makes connecting super duper easy. All right, Ryan, it's all yours.
All right, thank you. So what we're going to talk about really quick is the database actions we have in SQLcl or in ORDS. How we basically look at it, as well as the future, and we're going to show some sneak peek things here that of products that we have that are going to be released in the next few months. So you'll get to be you'll be the first group to see some of the stuff we do have coming very soon. So as Jeff said, with ORDS and with our next generation of stuff, we have these database actions. Now, what you're seeing here, this screen here with our awesome URL we have for this, which we did talk about in our Discord chat. We registered this URL for this demo today. What we have here is installed via Oracle REST data services. Now you can get Oracle data REST services from our OCI Yum repository. All you have to do is type yum install ords, or actually yum install SQLcl, and we'll install that on anything you have in OCI that's Linux based. But what we have here is we have ords running against a database VM. So we brought up a VM in OCI. It's just a 19C database, and we put ords on it very quickly. Then we threw a load balancer in front of it so we can have a custom URL in front of it, and that's what we have here. So this is running on a database. Now, again, this comes by default with the autonomous database, but if you're not using the autonomous database, you're using a regular Oracle database, you're using this on premises, you're using this in another cloud, you're using this wherever, you can install Oracle REST data services on that database and get all these great development tools that run in a browser. So to start, we have, let's just jump over to Data Modeler. And Data Modeler is a feature of the Oracle REST data services install. So again, I can look at tables, and what I can do is I can actually grab these tables. I'll just grab them in mass and I can throw them on my canvas here. And what that's going to do is it's going to create an ERD for me. And I can make this pretty. I'll go here and go auto layout, and it makes a nice little auto layout here. And again, it's all a good amount of the features that we have from the desktop tool, but we do have now in a web-based tool. I can click on foreign keys and see the information about it. I can click on a table and see information about it, the columns that are in that table, primary keys. I can also hit this cool little thing here, and it's going to say, hey, let me see the DDL preview. Here's all the DDL that I can run against this. And, just to save it off, if I wanted to save it, I could send it over directly to our SQL worksheet, or I can just save it to a file. We can export this out as an SGV diagram or SGV picture to pass around. And we can actually save this diagram locally, and we can refer back to it at any time. So my diagram saved, and we see here with diagrams, I can see all the diagrams that I have. Here, I can also create cool schema reports. I can click this button, and what it's going to do is going to create this cool little report that I have that I can save off as a PDF or give out or pass around. And it shows me all my tables and views and all that, and all the information about them. And if we were using column comments or descriptions, we would see them in there, but not a lot of people use those. I sometimes do. and then all the information. Here's our view. Here's the SQL for the view, and then all the tables, the view, and then we can see again our diagram here. So this is, really quickly just data model. There's a lot more functionality in here, but this is at least an overview. Now I can use this in the mega menu here, and I'll go to the SQL side of the house. And again, here is our SQL worksheet, just as we have with SQL Developer. And again, we can see tables, views, packages, procedures, indexes, functions, all that stuff you can see. We can also just take things and drag them onto our SQL worksheet and say select, or show me the object, do an insert, or delete, or update. We'll just do a select. And then I could run this and we'll see the output here on the bottom of the page here when we run that query. What we can also do is, here's our output. We can, let me just go back to our tables here. We can actually look at a table. We can right click it and open it. And we can see some information about the table. We can see the columns. We can see data within it. We can see the constraints, the grants, the statistics, all the information about the table just by left clicking it, which is really nice. Now we can also, speaking of Oracle REST data services, at any point I can, actually we'll just go back to our view. I can left click it and go REST and enable. And what this is going to do, it's going to automatically REST enable this table. I could put authentication or not on it, but if I hit enable, what we're going to see is we're going to have this cool little pluggy icon here. And now I'm able to look at this table via REST commands, or it's basically given it a REST endpoint. So I can actually take this URL, and this is going to get all the records from this table, and I can put it in a new tab here. And what it's going to do, and here it is, and here is that view all rested up. So if I go to raw data, you can see the actual raw JSON that it's spitting out for this particular REST endpoint I created. So this is a somewhat new feature we have in our SQL worksheet. And again, we also have a batch load API, and this can be used to batch load millions of files or millions of rows very, very quickly. Our live labs actually use the batch load API, and we'll talk about the live labs that we have later, but the live labs will actually have these to use for our, if you wanted to use them. I think one of the labs we have, which is a relational lab, or I should say is working with a table. We have this CSV file with over 2 million rows, and you load that in with the batch API. And then we have our JSON lab where you're working with actual JSON documents as you would with like a document store database that will use the batch API to load in, I think, 4,400 JSON docs into a collection. And speaking of that, if we go over to our JSON side of the house, here we have where we can work with our JSON data in the database just as we would with a document store. I could take a look at individual JSON documents. I can edit them right in line here if I wanted to, but I can at least see them. And then we can run what we call these QBEs here, these query by examples, to take a look at what we have in our JSON document store. And if I can find where I put my list of stuff here, we can actually do some samples. So if I wanted to take a look at all, this is data that we grabbed, is locally available data that we had. We just kind of altered a little bit. If I want to look at all the records I have here, and this is basically shows, how aircrafts are late, or why they're late in different airports. If I wanted to go all the ones that are in San Francisco SFO, I use this query by example, and it allows me to show me just the ones that are in SFO. We also have this great type ahead feature here that we have. So if I really wanted to, and I didn't know how to write that, I can actually go and start doing the airport code, and then it sets it up for me, DCA. And then I could run my query by example and just get the ones back from DCA. So it'll help you with type ahead. And I think all the web-based tools are doing this now. And then we can get really advanced with these. So we can now say, show me where our flight cancels is greater than 400 and the airport code is not DCA or national airport. And we can run that and we can say, okay, so here's Chicago, and we have JFK and a bunch of other places. So we can get really, really complex with our code. We can also, if we wanted to, go ahead and put a search index on this. And what this is going to allow us to do, it's going to allow it uses the Oracle database, and it allows us to basically search for text inside of any field that we have within our JSON document collection. So it puts that index right on the collection, and you can basically do, if you're familiar with Oracle text, you can basically issue queries on that, very similar to Oracle text. Now, there's SOTA APIs behind all this. So if you are a JSON application developer and you want to work with it in this way with a document database store, such as you would work with, MongoDB or something like that, you can interact with this collection via the SOTA API. So if you were building a mobile application, a Node.js application, and you want to just strictly talk JSON with it, you can do that and just hook this directly into it, and basically using the Oracle database at that point, like, as I said, like a document store. Or you can use straight Oracle REST data services and pass JSON back and forth and use the relational side of the house, just as you would a document store database. So you have a lot of options, and we basically boil it down that if you want to speak JSON back and forth to the database, then you're more than welcome to do that. Now, you saw that we REST enabled that table. Let's actually just go over to our REST module. And if you're familiar with how we did our REST stuff earlier, there was a lot of PL/SQL involved. Well, we put a great UI on top of this where I can create, these REST services from scratch very easily. You just go over to the modules, and I have one here. We'll take a look at that one. This is one that our manager, Chris, created for us. But if I wanted to create one, I can go hit module. I can quickly fill in this information, and I can REST enable custom SQL. I can REST enable packages, procedures, functions, and allow you to talk with these and then put security on top of it. So this one right here actually is a nice one where it allows you to look at AWR reports. So if I actually go and launch this REST API, it's going to give me a whole bunch of snapshots, and all I have to do is click on one of these links, and it's going to bring up, or should bring up, this nice AWR report that I can look at directly from Oracle REST Data Services. So this is a really nice one that Chris wrote for us that shows you the power of our database and the power of the REST services, that we can now pull up these cool AWR reports directly from a REST service API, which is really nice. So again, this is just running on a 19C database I put on a VM in OCI. It's just easier because that I can get to it, and it's a publicly available API endpoint or publicly available IP address that I can use for this. But now that this is the ingrained stuff we have, what's also important for developers is that if you need to monitor, take a look at your database, we have all these monitoring tools built in to this service. So let's start with Instance Viewer. Instance Viewer is a great way to take a look at what's going on with my database, number of clients, what's going on with the actual SQL, if there's any issues, this is going to tell me what's going on, and it's a real time. All these things will move and run in real time with it. Here my storage, my data file storage, if I'm going to run out of storage, and all the information about this particular database, which is really nice because if I'm not a DBA and I don't know where to look for this, all I do is go here, click on this little link, and I'm able to see what's going on with my database. We also have the Performance Hub, which is something that in the cloud you've seen on autonomous databases. Well, now we have it running on, again, if you just install ORDS out of the box on any database, you're going to get to be able to use this. There's not a lot of stuff going on with my database, but there's a little bit going on, and you can see the SQL and hover over it and see what's going on. This is basically just saying that you ran an AWR report recently. And lastly, again, there's you can look at your sessions, your storage, your init params, and then the top SQL logins and alerts. So there's a lot of stuff. And then there's an overall monitoring page that's going to kind of give me an overall view of what's going on with my database. And I can click into any of these features or any of these fields to see what's going on. So it's a nice, helpful utility or tool to see what's going on with my database. And I don't have to be a DBA, or it could be a DBA, to take a look closely in what's going on. Now, as I said, this is our next generation. So let's look at what's coming. And what's coming very soon is what we call data visualizations. Okay. Data visualizations is something that we have been working on for the past maybe 6 months, and it just kind of spawned out of all these charts and graphs that we saw with COVID. So any state and local, any state, any municipality had all these charts and graphs that said, the current infection rate and new infections and cured and vaccinated people and all that. So like, we could probably do this as well, and let's expose data in a very easy way for people to use and share and put in maybe, Slack messages, or to embed there, or to pass around, or to embed in reports, or to embed in websites. So what we've done is we've created this thing called data visualizations, where we can create these very easy data visualizations. Right now, we just have individual charts, but this is going to be placed. You're going to be able to take multiple charts and put them on a dashboard, and then share that dashboard to multiple people, multiple groups, with all the security of what we have with our REST APIs you can do with our dashboard. So if I create a chart, very easily create a chart. We have this slider, I name a chart. So we'll call it my chart, a cool chart. And then I can create SQL right here. So select star from, and we're going to have to do type ahead, EMP, we'll do employees. And what this is going to do is it's going to update this, and it's going to say, oh, okay, labels, your label here is going to probably be a varchar, so it knows that. And so we're going to, let's use email. And then for our value, we're going to do salary. And that way, what we have is we have this cool chart that's created here on the bottom. And I could toggle between the chart and the data at any time to see my information. And then I'm going to create it. So I've just created this chart. And now if I actually want to see it, I'm going to hit this open in a new tab. And then here is my chart. I can toggle between the data view and the chart view. And then I can share this chart with other people. It's going to have a quick little, share button, so I can share this out. We can embed this, and again, as I said, these are going to be able to be put multiple charts within a dashboard, and then you'll be able to share these dashboards. We're not doing anything like the analytics cloud is doing, but anything you can do with SQL, you can do and create a chart. So this is something that we'll probably have available within the next couple of months. You'll see this as part of Oracle REST Data Services, out of the box and free, as Jeff said. Then the next thing we want to show you that's coming is something we call database connections. And here I am in our OCI console. And over here, what you'll eventually see later this summer in our developer service is something called database tools. And with database tools, what we have is we're going to allow you to create connections within OCI to your OCI databases. These databases could be, we'll just get to it. So my connection, name it. And these databases can be an autonomous database. They could be a VM or bare metal, or they can be an Exadata Cloud Service database. We actually go and we self-discover these databases for you. So here we found, there's a VM database on here. We found the database home. We found the database on there. And now we've actually looked and we found, okay, here are the PDBs that are part of this database home, or part of the CDB. I'm going to give it a username to log in, and then I'm going to provide it a password. Now, you could have preset passwords, or you can create a password, and we hold these passwords in the OCI vault. So they're secure. We don't store them in plain text in some database that's part of the service. We're storing them actually in the OCI vault. Once they're there, they're reusable. Now, the great thing about this connection and all these secrets that we have here are these are OCI level resources. They all have what we call OCIDs. So I can apply security to the actual connection itself as well as the password. So what's this getting us to? What's this giving us? Well, what this is giving us is the ability to create these connections that I can use in other OCI services, as well as I can use in, say, SQLcl. So I can bring up a SQLcl instance and say connect, and give it the OCID of that one of these database connections that I have access to. And what SQLcl is going to do and say, oh, okay, I know what I'm going to do. It's going to go get that connection information. It's going to get the user. It's going to get the password, and it's going to log me directly into this database just using that OSID, because again, these connections are secured based upon policies we have. So you could envision creating these generic connections for developers and saying, you get this one, you get this one, and you get this one. They're used with multiple services. So if the password changes, I don't have to change it in 52 places. I just have to change it in one place. But it also allows us to use a SQL worksheet with this. So now if I want to use a SQL connection with a database that's an OCI, I don't have to set up bastions. I don't have to set up jump servers. I don't have to set up all these internet gateways to get into this database that's an OCI. I can just jump into the SQL worksheet and run SQL connections against this database. I believe this one is working. So basically, select sysdate from Dual, and it's going to go and it's going to run this SQL connection or the SQL against this particular database connection. And of course, I've chosen the wrong one, but let's actually find one that's working. And I ran this yesterday and it was working fine. But in typical demo, of course, it's not going to work for me. But what it's going to allow me to do, and I can actually verify my connection with the connections beforehand, it's, as I said, it allows you to work with these databases via these connections. And again, I can change connections at any point right here in the OCI console. So again, I don't have to create all these bastions or hoops or anything to jump through. It's directly right here in the OCI console. So it's actually really, really nice on how we do this. So, this is just select sysdate, but again, I can create tables, I can insert, I can do whatever I want. I can work with these databases directly from here. So these two things, charts and these database connections, are something that we have coming. It should be in the next couple months. And they'll be available as a no-cost option to you. They're going to be free within OCI. And again, the charts are going to be free via Oracle REST data services, as well as you'll see it pop up on the autonomous database since we install Oracle REST data services there for you by default. With that, I think I'm handing it back over to Jeff to take over with, or we've come back to SQLcl.
Thank you. Number 2. We had lots of questions in the chat. Some recap for the people that might have the same questions. Can I run database actions or SQL Developer Web on-prem? Yes, you absolutely can. It's not cloud only. It was cloud first. So let me come back to slides. So where did SQL Developer Web come from? We had this first gen database as a service that launched in 2018. And we had the worksheet and the modeler pages there out of the box for those subscribers. And then when Autonomous launched, SQL Developer Web got a major upgrade for that platform. And then later in 2019, I think it was like maybe in December of 2019, we were given the go-ahead to make SQL Developer Web available to anybody that wanted it. So if you download ORDS from oracle.com/rest, install it on some suitable mid-tier that's got good connectivity to your database servers, you can hook ORDS up to as many databases as you want and publish those links for your users to log in and do all that stuff. They won't need clients or JDBC drivers. They'll just need links and usernames and passwords. It's our new flagship platform. So the desktop tooling isn't going away, but based on that JDeveloper framework, it limits us in ways we don't want to be limited. And, the wave of the future is HTTP and browser-based apps. So ORDS gives us that flexibility. And what you see us doing right now is taking the popular stuff out of the desktop app and moving it into the web-based app. That doesn't mean there can't be a desktop app version of the web solution going forward. And that's some of the things that we're looking at, and even like building similar plugins for your favorite other IDEs and text editors. All of this stuff that you're seeing today is possible because Chris back in the day said, hey, we should take these I'm trying to use a word that doesn't use the word to describe it. Take all of these core popular things that we're going to want to use in more than one place features and put them into a commons library. So this powerful parser that we have, this powerful SQL plus script execution engine that we have, it's in this commons library that's then made accessible to things like SQL Developer, SQLcl, ORDs. We have REST endpoints that make the parser and the formatter and the script engine available to anyone making HTTP calls. So when we build things for one platform, they're almost immediately available for all of them. SQL Developer Web would not be possible today if we hadn't started working on ORDs years ago and went with this common library framework. So I promised a preview of what's coming new for SQLcl. And if you've never seen SQLcl before, then I'll give you just a little tour as well. So let's look at something like statement output formatting. We fit it to the screen as best we can. I've got a larger font, so there's still a little bit of wrapping. But if I had to say select first name, last name, salary, department, ID, employees, fetch first. You can see that that is nicely formatted out of the box. If I don't want text format output, if I want CSV, that's a simple set SQL format CSV / run it again, and there's that. Up arrow gets me my command history. I could say JSON formatted, run it again, and there's my JSON documents. I want insert statements. There's my insert statements. So everything that you like about SQL Plus is in here. We've just enhanced or added to it. If you use the help command, we'll print you all of the commands available. The new ones have been underlined. So here's you see things like Oracle error message lookup, OERR, liquid base. A lot of these are self-descriptive, like alias or CD or history, and some of them maybe need a little bit of demo. So if I say describe locations, everybody knows what describe is. It helps if you say if you change your SQL format. Describe locations. Yeah, so there's that plain boring. What's the primary key? Are there any indexes, any foreign keys? Like, what are my comments? If I instead say info locations, this is a better version of describe. So we tell you a little bit about the metadata of the object. How fresh are the statistics? What are the statistics? What are the comments on the table? The primary key, it's marked with an asterisk. Here are the column comments. Here are the indexes. Here are the foreign key constraints. A better editor interface experience is in here. So I can do crazy things like start typing. Say, you know what, I messed up. I want to come back up here. I can use the arrow keys and actually go through the buffer and change stuff. So I got insight. I can hit tab. It brings me up the column list in the table. So I know I want first name, and I want last name, and I want salary. And then to execute immediately, it's just Control R. Command history, come back, change this. Again, oh, I forget first names, so.
Even.
We're just gonna do.
You do last name as king.
Yeah. Come on, first. I can't type today. 5 only. So there's that. Now, some of the new stuff built in here, you probably have already seen on the screen if you're not new to SQLcl. So on the bottom, there's a toolbar banner showing me my instance name of the database, showing me who I'm logged in as, showing my cursor position, and showing my editor mode. So I'm in insert mode for VI. I don't want this line. If I hit escape, I'm now in command mode. Now I say DD, it's gone. If I toggle back to insert mode with I'm in insert mode and I can start doing stuff again. Where one, that's dumb. Where commission percent is not null. You know what? I don't like this word, so I escape back to command mode and then say, what is it? DW for delete word. Oops, helps if you're escape DW. Yep, so that's gone. And now back to insert mode and then say last name and then Control R to run that. I can change the editor mode to Emacs if I want to do it the wrong way. Sorry, too easy. Let's come back and look. Oh, the other thing you've got on the screen here is I've got the ability to set highlighting on. So I've got keywords green, I've got strings blue, I've got numbers yellow, I think. No, I've got comments yellow. If you hate this, you don't have to use it. None of this will be on out of the box. You'll be turning it on if you want to use it with set commands, and you can see what currently is what with the show. So show all, and I've got my status bar on with these components on. I can change the order of those components. I've got my default editor mode set to VI. I could change it to Emacs. Here's my highlighting scheme. Other new things in here that aren't necessarily tied to the editor itself. A lot of cloud things. So SQLcl command line, it's powerful on-prem. It's just as powerful in the Oracle cloud. So we've got support for really making any call via the OCI REST APIs. So if I want to go into the object store and pull out something, or actually, here's something better. If I want to spool the output of a file directly to the object store, I can do that in SQLcl. I hate turning this into a cloud pitch because I know probably half of you aren't using the cloud today, but just know this, if you do go to the cloud, the tools there are built to support it from day zero, whether that's the desktop apps with the easy wallet configs and the data pump and the export import features, or whether it's the command line, and of course, whether it's the command line interface. Can we do a search too to find a SQL I executed before? I've asked for this feature and it hasn't gotten built yet. What you can do right now is just say history and it shows everything you've ran. What I'd like to see is like a history and then the text, and then it would filter that. So it's not there yet, I don't think. Trying to think of other cool things to do in SQLcl you might find of interest. Tab completion really for me is most of it, and then just this nicer multi-line editor. That's what gets me excited. But again, here's that keyword list. I mean, you can create your own putty type SSH tunnels if you do need to jump between a different box. Here's a crazy one. Just the ability to change the path, where we're reading from, where we're writing to in your scripts. If you want to read from one script and write to another, you just say CD and everything that's going to happen at this point, that, you don't have to exit the tool and come back in from the right directory to do what you want. So even though we're talking next gen stuff and a lot of people treat the command line as this old school approach, we're trying to put modern things into the command line. And even making the command line available directly inside the app. So having like a pull down command prompt in database actions, that kind of stuff we're looking at. Someone's asking, did I hear correctly? SQLcl will be available to install in the Oracle Linux via Yum. If so, what repo will it be? We're going to be publishing SQLcl to the Linux public Yum repo. Right now, I think it's just in
It's just OCI, yeah.
It's just an OCI Oracle one. Is there a way to save this QA text? I don't know what QA is.
The question and answer text. Like
I
think we can get a copy of it.
The
for
recording
later.
will give us that. And usually what I like to do with these posts is put the video, the slides, and the interesting questions with answers in a blog post. So yeah, you can have access to those. I will happily yield 2 minutes back to our audience. Or Brian, did you want to end or show anything?
No, I think, with SQLcl, just to, as we said, even everything we showed here today is available wherever your Oracle databases are. Save a few little cloud specific things. SQLcl, SQL Developer, Oracle REST Data Services can all be installed and used on premises. It could be installed and used on Oracle Cloud. It could be installed and used on someone else's cloud. It could be installed and used on your desktop or on your laptop. There's nothing cloud specific. Our stuff is basically utilized to run wherever you have an Oracle database. Like Jeff said, there are some OCI specific command line stuff with working with the object store and some security stuff and some more stuff we have coming in with SQLcl. But for the most part, you can use it anywhere an Oracle database is. And as we saw with the demo that we showed today, that was just a VM database running somewhere. It wasn't an autonomous database or a specific magic database. And lastly, as we said before, we do have a lot of this stuff over in, I'm going to grab the screen from you real quick here.
All yours.
If I could find where...
You have the con number 2.
Thank you. We do have some live labs that we did create recently. If you want to explore more on this, the first one is a web conference we did just a few weeks ago, which is your choose your own JSON adventure, which goes through using JSON in the Oracle database in a relational way or in a document store way. You go through and you're able to do a lot of the stuff in that one. So that's a great one to run. And again, this can be run on pretty much any database that I think is 19C or above. You could probably run it on 18 as well. But it also runs on the always free database. So again, if you have an OCI account, you bring up an always free autonomous database and you can run all these labs. We actually create the labs on always free to make sure they work and they work well. The second one is we just came off a live event, a modern app dev live event we had last week or 2 weeks ago. And out of that one, we created a comprehensive workshop on creating REST services on your data. This is the one where you use the batch load API and load 2 million records directly into your database. This also uses the always free one, but it could be used on any database that you have Oracle REST Data Services installed on. So these are 2 of the main labs we have today. There's a few others that we have in there as well, and we're going to be creating more of these as we go on. So these are the 2 that we just wanted to highlight today as we end.
If you're wondering when exactly you can get your hands on the new stuff, everything we showed today is tied to the 21.2 version line. And while we don't give release dates, we do have quarter schedules. So, I mean, that basically means the end of June. Sometimes the July 4th holiday gets in the way. The cloud connections worksheet stuff, Brian demoed, that's later this summer. So we're also always open to your enhancement requests. If you can find Chris, if you can find Brian, if you can find me, shoot those over. The Discord channel is a cool place to do that if you're not wanting to share publicly on Twitter, and you also have our emails. This was a great showing. Thanks so much for joining us today.
Yeah, thanks everyone. And again, join our Discord as Jeff says. And if you have a story you want to tell us about how you're using any of these tools, please tell us. We'd love to feature you in an upcoming web conference that we want to make all about you and not Jeff and I talking. So watch out for that one as well.
Just answering a few more questions in the Q&A before we kick people off. Is it possible to unload a table via SQLcl to an AWS S3 bucket? Yes-ish. The object storage support we have built in is for our object store. But once you've spooled the file out to a local file, then you can just curl it over. I'm not super interested in helping you move your data to S3, but yeah, I can totally do that. The videos, those are usually available to us within an hour or so. Oh, Anusha's answering that one. Yeah, they'll definitely be available. When can we look for dates for when updates will be made to the shared environments? The autonomous, I'm assuming they're talking about autonomous. The autonomous shared environments, we update as frequently as every 2 weeks, but major updates follow pretty close to the on-prem updates. So when 21.2 goes out on-prem, it will have already been submitted to cloud. So same end of June, early July kind of time scale for autonomous. I think that's all the questions now.
Yeah, just a pointer to our Git repo, and yeah, that we try to keep that Git repo up to date with all sorts of fun things in there. So we're working on some CI/CD stuff and some other stuff in there as well as just examples. So.
Someone's asking, who does number 2 work for? I don't.
That's right.
All right. Thanks again, everyone. Have enjoyed the rest of your week.